What would you do if you woke up from a coma to discover that the person you trusted most in the world, your own blood brother, had destroyed everything you'd built and abandoned your family to suffer? Today's story will show you how betrayal can come from the closest places, and how a man's love for his family can either save him or destroy him completely. Hit that subscribe button before we begin, because this tale of brotherhood, betrayal, and ultimate redemption will test everything you believe about family loyalty. Now let's dive into this incredible story. Marcus Thompson stood on the balcony of his Manhattan penthouse, watching the sun set over the city he'd conquered through sheer determination and relentless work. At 35, he was everything the American dream promised, a self-made millionaire who'd built an empire from nothing, transforming a small construction business into Thompson Industries, one of the most successful real estate development companies on the East Coast. The penthouse itself was a testament to his success. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered breathtaking views of Central Park, while the interior showcased the kind of understated luxury that spoke of genuine wealth rather than flashy displays. Every piece of furniture, every artwork on the walls, every detail of the space reflected Marcus's journey from the son of a mechanic to a man who employed thousands and whose decisions shaped city skylines. But the real treasure of Marcus's life wasn't his wealth or his business empire. It was the family that filled this beautiful space with laughter and love. "Daddy, look what I drew." 8-year-old Emma came running onto the balcony, her dark curls bouncing as she clutched a crayon masterpiece. The drawing showed a family of stick figures standing in front of a house. Marcus recognized himself by the tie she'd carefully colored blue, his wife Sarah by her long yellow hair, and their son Michael by his soccer ball. Marcus knelt down to examine the artwork with the serious attention it deserved. "This is incredible, sweetheart. You're going to be a famous artist someday." Emma beamed with pride. "Can we put it on the refrigerator?" "We'll put it in a frame," Marcus replied, lifting his daughter into his arms. "Something this beautiful deserves to be displayed properly." Sarah peered in the doorway, and Marcus felt his heart skip a beat the way it had for the past 12 years. She was 32 now, still as stunning as the day they'd met in college. But it was her inner strength and unwavering support that had made her truly beautiful in his eyes. Through every risk he'd taken, every late night at the office, every moment of doubt when he'd wondered if he was crazy to bet everything on his vision, Sarah had been there. "Dinner's ready," she announced, but her smile told him she'd been watching this moment between father and daughter with the same appreciation he felt every day for their life together. 10-year-old Michael came thundering out onto the balcony, still in his soccer uniform from practice. "Mom said we're having Dad's favorite tonight." Marcus laughed, setting Emma down and ruffling his son's hair. Sarah's lasagna had been his weakness since college, and she still made it from scratch every Sunday, a tradition that had somehow survived his transformation from struggling student to successful businessman. As they gathered around their dining room table, a massive piece of reclaimed wood that had cost more than Marcus's first car but somehow made every meal feel like a celebration, Marcus looked at the faces of the people he loved most in the world and felt a contentment that no amount of money could purchase. "Tell us about your day, Daddy," Emma said, carefully cutting her lasagna into perfect squares the way she did everything else. Marcus thought about his day, meetings with investors, decisions about a new development project in Brooklyn, negotiations that would affect hundreds of jobs and millions of dollars. But looking at his children's eager faces, he realized what they really wanted wasn't business updates, but connection with their father. "Well," he said dramatically, "I spent most of the day thinking about what we should do for our vacation this summer. I was thinking maybe Italy. Would you like to see where Grandma and Grandpa came from?" The children's excitement was immediate and infectious. Sarah reached over and squeezed his hand, her eyes shining with the kind of joy that reminded Marcus why he worked so hard. Everything he built, every risk he took, every hour he spent away from them was an investment in moments like these. After dinner, as they settled into their evening routine, homework supervision, bedtime stories, the quiet conversations between husband and wife that had anchored their marriage through every challenge, Marcus reflected on how far they'd come. He'd grown up in Queens, the son of Italian immigrants who'd worked themselves to exhaustion trying to provide for their 2 sons. His father, Giuseppe, had been a mechanic who taught Marcus the value of hard work and attention to detail. His mother, Maria, had cleaned houses and taken in sewing to help make ends meet, but she'd never complained, never suggested that her sacrifices weren't worth it. Marcus had one sibling, his younger brother Vincent, who was 2 years behind him but had always seemed older in some ways, more streetwise, more willing to take shortcuts that Marcus instinctively avoided. Where Marcus was methodical and careful, Vincent was impulsive and charismatic. Where Marcus saved every penny, Vincent spent freely and borrowed when necessary. They were opposites in many ways, but the bond between them had always been unbreakable. Vincent had been the best man at Marcus's wedding, the first person Marcus called when Emma was born, the uncle who spoiled his children shamelessly and made them laugh until their sides hurt. He was family in the deepest sense, not just by blood but by choice, by history, by the thousand shared experiences that had shaped them both. Vincent had also been Marcus's business partner in the early days, though he'd eventually found that the corporate world didn't suit his restless personality. He'd sold his share of the company back to Marcus 5 years ago, using the money to open a chain of restaurants that catered to his love of good food and social interaction. The arrangement had worked perfectly. Vincent had his creative freedom, Marcus had full control of his vision, and both brothers had prospered. More importantly, Vincent had remained a constant presence in Marcus's family life. He came to Sunday dinners, never missed the children's birthdays, and had a standing invitation to every holiday celebration. He was Uncle Vincent to Emma and Michael, the fun adult who could be counted on for inappropriate jokes, elaborate presents, and adventures that their more responsible father might not approve of. "I should call Vincent," Marcus said to Sarah as they cleaned up the dinner dishes together. "Make sure he's coming to Emma's birthday party next weekend." Sarah smiled. "He's been planning her gift for a month. I think he's more excited about it than she is." That was Vincent, generous to a fault, especially when it came to his brother's children. Marcus sometimes worried that his brother spent too freely, lived too much in the moment without sufficient thought for the future. But Vincent always seemed to land on his feet. Besides, if Vincent ever needed help, Marcus would be there for him without hesitation. That's what family meant. As Marcus tucked Emma into bed that night, reading her favorite story about a princess who saved her kingdom through cleverness rather than waiting for rescue, he thought about the life he'd built and how grateful he was for every piece of it. "Daddy," Emma said sleepily as he finished the story, "are we rich?" The question caught Marcus off guard. "Why do you ask, sweetheart?" "My friend Katie said her mom thinks we're rich because we live in a big house and you wear fancy suits." Marcus considered how to answer. He never wanted his children to take their privileges for granted, but he also didn't want them to feel guilty about the comfortable life his hard work had provided. "We're very blessed," he said finally. "I work hard to take care of our family, and that means we can live in a nice house and have good food and clothes. But the most important things we have: love, family, friendship. Those aren't about money." Emma nodded seriously. "Like Uncle Vincent. He doesn't live in a big house, but he's still important to us." "Exactly like Uncle Vincent," Marcus agreed, kissing his daughter's forehead. "He's important to us because we love him, not because of what he has or doesn't have." As Marcus turned off Emma's bedroom light and walked down the hallway toward his own room, he felt a deep satisfaction with a lesson he'd just shared. Family loyalty, mutual support, unconditional love. These were the values that had guided his life and would hopefully guide his children's lives as well. Marcus had no way of knowing that in less than 24 hours, those values would be put to the ultimate test, and the brother he trusted above all others would face a choice between loyalty and greed that would destroy everything Marcus had built. That night, Marcus Thompson went to sleep surrounded by love, secure in his success, and completely confident that the people he cared about most would always be there for him. He was about to learn how dangerously wrong he could be. The call came at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in October, shattering the peaceful quiet of the Thompson household like a brick through glass. Sarah jolted awake at the first ring, her hand automatically reaching for the phone while Marcus groaned and rolled over, still deep in sleep. "Hello?" Sarah's voice was thick with sleep and growing concern. "Who called at this hour unless something was terribly wrong?" "Mrs. Thompson, this is Dr. Patricia Martinez from Mount Sinai Hospital. I'm calling about your husband, Marcus Thompson. He's been in a serious accident." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow, driving all the air from her lungs and sending ice through her veins. She sat up in bed, suddenly completely awake, her heart hammering against her ribs. What kind of accident? Is he okay? I don't understand. He's right here. Sarah turned toward Marcus's side of the bed, but it was empty, the sheets cold to the touch. Confusion mixed with terror as she tried to process what was happening. Ma'am, your husband was involved in a multi-vehicle collision on the FDR Drive approximately 2 hours ago. He's currently in our trauma unit in critical condition. I need you to come to the hospital immediately. Sarah's hands began shaking so violently she could barely hold the phone. Marcus hadn't been in bed when the call came. He'd gotten up for something, probably went to his study to check emails or review contracts like he sometimes did when he couldn't sleep. But that meant he'd gone out, left the house without telling her, and now, how bad is it? Sarah managed to ask, though she wasn't sure she wanted to hear the answer. Dr. Martinez's pause told her everything she needed to know. Mrs. Thompson, your husband has sustained severe traumatic brain injury along with multiple other injuries. He's alive, but his condition is very serious. We need you here as soon as possible. The next 2 hours passed in a nightmare blur. Sarah called her neighbor Mrs. Chun to stay with the sleeping children, threw on clothes with hands that wouldn't stop trembling, and drove through empty city streets toward the hospital where her husband, her partner, her anchor, the center of her world, lay fighting for his life. Mount Sinai's trauma unit was a world of harsh fluorescent lights, antiseptic smells, and the constant beeping of machines that measured the difference between life and death in digital readouts. Sarah found herself in a waiting room that had probably seen thousands of families receive the worst news of their lives, sitting on uncomfortable chairs that seemed designed to make an unbearable situation even more difficult. Dr. Martinez was a small woman with kind eyes and the gentle manner of someone who delivered devastating news countless times, but never became immune to its impact. Mrs. Thompson, I want to be completely honest with you about your husband's condition, she began, settling into the chair beside Sarah. Marcus suffered what we call a traumatic brain injury when his vehicle was struck by a drunk driver. The impact was severe, and there's significant swelling in his brain. Sarah nodded, trying to focus on the words while her mind screamed protests. This couldn't be happening. Just hours ago, Marcus had been reading bedtime stories to Emma, laughing at Michael's jokes over dinner, planning their summer vacation to Italy. People like Marcus, good people, careful people, responsible people, didn't get hurt like this. We've induced a medically controlled coma to reduce the swelling and give his brain time to heal, Dr. Martinez continued. It's our best option right now, but I have to tell you that the next few days will be critical. We won't know the extent of any permanent damage until the swelling goes down and we can assess his brain function more thoroughly. Can I see him? Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Martinez nodded. Of course, but I want to prepare you. He's going to look different than what you're used to. The machines, the tubes, the monitoring equipment, it can be overwhelming. Nothing could have prepared Sarah for the sight of her husband connected to machines that breathed for him, monitored his heart rate, tracked his brain activity with wires taped to his skull. Marcus, who had always been so vital and strong, so completely in control of his world, looked fragile and vulnerable in ways that made Sarah's chest ache with grief and fear. She pulled a chair close to his bedside and took his hand, noting how cold it felt despite the warm hospital air. I'm here, Marcus, she whispered, though she had no idea if he could hear her. The kids are safe. Everything's going to be okay. But even as she said the words, Sarah wondered how anything could be okay again. The call to Vincent came next, and Sarah dreaded making it almost as much as she dreaded the possibility of losing Marcus. Vincent answered on the second ring, sounding alert despite the early hour. Sarah, what's wrong? Sarah had always appreciated Vincent's ability to read situations quickly. There was no pretending this was a casual call at 5 a.m. It's Marcus, she said, and then the words came pouring out, the accident, the brain injury, the coma, the uncertainty about what would happen next. Vincent listened without interrupting, and Sarah could hear him moving around, probably getting dressed to come to the hospital. I'm on my way, he said when she finished. Have you called work? Do the kids know? Sarah realized she hadn't thought about any of the practical implications. Marcus's company, his meetings, his responsibilities, none of that mattered right now, but it would have to be dealt with eventually. And the children, How do you tell a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old that their father might not come home? I haven't told them anything yet, Sarah admitted. They're still sleeping. I don't know what to say. We'll figure it out, Vincent said, his voice carrying the kind of steady confidence that Marcus usually provided. One thing at a time. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Vincent arrived exactly 20 minutes later, still wearing the wrinkled clothes he'd apparently thrown on in his rush to get to the hospital. Sarah had always thought the brothers looked alike. Both had their father's strong jaw and their mother's dark eyes. But she'd never noticed the resemblance as much as she did in that moment, when seeing Vincent felt like getting a piece of Marcus back. He hugged her tightly, and for the first time since the phone call, Sarah allowed herself to cry, deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from somewhere beyond rational thought. He's going to be okay, Vincent murmured into her hair, though Sarah wondered if he believed it any more than she did. Marcus is the strongest person I know. He's going to fight his way back. They sat together in the ICU waiting room as morning arrived, taking turns going in to see Marcus, calling relatives and friends, trying to figure out how to manage the practical realities of a life suddenly turned upside down. Vincent handled most of the phone calls with the same natural leadership that Marcus usually provided, and Sarah felt grateful beyond words to have him there. What'd I tell the kids? Sarah asked as they shared terrible hospital coffee around 8 a.m. Vincent considered the question carefully. The truth, but in a way they can handle. Daddy was hurt in an accident. The doctors are taking very good care of him, and it's going to take some time for him to get better. But we don't know if he will get better, Sarah said quietly. Then we believe he will until we know otherwise, Vincent replied firmly. Hope is the only thing we have right now. By afternoon, Sarah realized she needed to go home to the children. They'd been with Mrs. Chen all day, and while their neighbor was wonderful, Emma and Michael needed their mother to explain why their father wasn't coming home, why everything suddenly felt different and scary. I'll stay here, Vincent offered. Someone should be with him. Sarah nodded gratefully. The idea of leaving Marcus alone, even for a few hours, felt like abandonment. But Vincent would be there, and if anything changed, if Marcus showed any sign of waking up, Vincent would call immediately. The conversation with Emma and Michael was one of the hardest things Sarah had ever done. She sat them down in their living room, the same space where they'd laughed over dinner just 24 hours earlier, and tried to find words that would convey the seriousness of the situation without completely terrifying them. Daddy was hurt in a car accident last night, she began, pulling both children close to her on the couch. He's in the hospital and the doctors are taking very good care of him, but he's going to need to stay there for a while to get better. Emma's eyes filled with tears immediately. Is Daddy going to die? The question hung in the air like a live wire, dangerous and impossible to ignore. Sarah chose honesty over false comfort. I don't know, sweetheart. The doctors say he's very sick, but they're doing everything they can to help him. What I do know is that Daddy loves us very much, and he's going to fight as hard as he can to come home to us. Michael, trying to be the man of the house at 10 years old, asked the practical questions. Can we see him? When will he wake up? Who's going to take care of us? Sarah answered what she could and admitted uncertainty about the rest. Yes, they could visit their father once he was stable enough for children to be in the ICU. No, the doctors didn't know when he would wake up, and Sarah would take care of them with help from Uncle Vincent and other family members. Uncle Vincent is at the hospital right now, staying with Daddy so he won't be alone, Sarah explained. He's going to help us with everything while Daddy gets better. Over the next few days, Vincent became Sarah's lifeline. He managed the complex logistics of Marcus's business, fielded calls from employees and clients, and somehow kept Thompson Industries functioning while its owner lay unconscious in a hospital bed. He helped Sarah navigate insurance paperwork, medical decisions, and the thousand small crises that seemed to emerge whenever someone's life was suddenly derailed. More importantly, Vincent provided emotional support for a family that was struggling to function without its cornerstone. He picked the children up from school when Sarah couldn't leave the hospital, helped with homework, made sure they ate dinner even when nobody felt like cooking. He slept on the couch most nights, claiming he wanted to be available if Sarah needed anything, but really providing the comfort of another adult presence in a house that suddenly felt too quiet and too empty. I don't know what I would do without you, Sarah told him one evening after they'd gotten the children to bed and were sitting together in the living room, both too exhausted to do anything but stare at the television without really watching it. Vincent reached over and squeezed her hand. "You'll never have to find out. Marcus would do the same for me if our situations were reversed. This is what family does." As the days turned into weeks and Marcus remained unconscious, Vincent gradually took on more responsibility for both the business and the household. It was a natural progression. Sarah was spending 12 hours a day at the hospital, and someone needed to make sure the children's lives maintained some semblance of normalcy while their father fought for his life. Vincent signed papers, made decisions, and managed crises with the same decisive energy that Marcus had always brought to challenges. He assured Sarah that everything was under control, that she should focus entirely on supporting Marcus's recovery and taking care of herself and the children. Sarah was grateful beyond words for Vincent's help, and she told him so repeatedly. She had no way of knowing that while she sat beside Marcus's hospital bed. The breaking point came during the 4th month, when Dr. Martinez called Sarah with news that Marcus's condition had stabilized enough to begin reducing the medically induced coma. "We're going to start bringing him back gradually," she explained during a meeting in her office. "It's a slow process, and we still don't know what level of function he'll have when he's fully conscious, but his brain activity looks encouraging." Sarah cried with relief and immediately called Vincent with the news. But instead of the joy she expected, Vincent's reaction was strangely muted. "That's wonderful," he said, but Sarah detected something in his voice that might have been anxiety rather than celebration. "What's the timeline? When do they think he'll be fully awake?" Sarah found the question odd. "Vincent, Marcus is getting better. Isn't that all that matters?" "Of course," Vincent said quickly. "I'm just thinking about business continuity, making sure everything is organized for when he's ready to take back control." But Vincent wasn't thinking about returning control to Marcus. He was thinking about how much he had to lose if his brother woke up and discovered what had been done with his empire during his absence. Over the following weeks, as Marcus began showing signs of consciousness, Vincent faced a choice that would define the rest of his life. He could confess what he'd done, return what he could, and hope that his brother's love was strong enough to forgive betrayal motivated by greed and envy. Or he could double down on his deception, find ways to hide his actions, and pray that Marcus's recovery would be incomplete enough that he'd never fully understand what had been stolen from him. Vincent chose deception. As Marcus began to stir from his coma, Vincent accelerated his asset transfers, moved money to accounts that his brother would never think to examine, and prepared to gaslight the very person who had trusted him most in the world. The brother who had once promised to always protect Marcus's family was about to abandon them entirely, leaving them with nothing but the wreckage of a fortune that Vincent had systematically plundered. The ultimate betrayal wasn't just financial. It was the murder of unconditional love and trust, replaced by lies so profound that they would poison every family relationship for years to come. While Marcus lay fighting for his life, and Vincent systematically dismantled his brother's empire, Sarah Thompson was discovering what it meant to be truly alone in the world for the first time in her adult life. The first sign that something was changing came in small ways that Sarah initially dismissed as stress-related oversights. Vincent, who had been so attentive and supportive during the first months of Marcus's hospitalization, began taking longer to return her calls. When she needed help with the children or had questions about financial matters, Vincent's responses became shorter and less helpful. "I'm swamped with work stuff," he would say when Sarah apologized for bothering him. Marcus had a lot of complicated business deals in progress. "I'm trying to keep everything together until he gets better." Sarah understood. She'd always known that Marcus's business was complex and demanding, and she was grateful that Vincent was willing to sacrifice his own time and energy to protect what Marcus had built. But she couldn't shake the feeling that Vincent was becoming distant in ways that went beyond mere business pressure. The financial pressures began mounting in the 4th month of Marcus's coma. Hospital bills that insurance didn't cover, experimental treatments that offered hope but cost thousands of dollars, rehabilitation specialists who might help Marcus recover faster but charged premium rates. The expenses accumulated faster than Sarah had ever imagined possible. When Sarah called Vincent to discuss selling some of Marcus's investments to cover medical costs, Vincent's response was troubling. "Actually, Sarah, we've already liquidated most of the easily accessible assets," he said, his voice carrying a tone she'd never heard from him before, businesslike, almost cold. "The medical expenses have been enormous, And combined with the ongoing costs of maintaining Thompson Industries during Marcus's absence, we've had to make some tough financial decisions. Sarah felt a chill of fear that had nothing to do with Marcus's condition. What kind of decisions? Vincent, I don't understand any of this. I need to know what's happening with our finances. It's complicated, Vincent replied, and Sarah detected irritation in his voice. Look, I'm trying to protect you from having to worry about business details while you're dealing with Marcus's medical situation. Trust me, everything is being handled responsibly. But Sarah was beginning to realize that she couldn't afford to remain ignorant about their finances. She made an appointment with Robert Steinberg, Marcus's attorney, to get a clearer picture of their situation. What Steinberg told her was devastating. Mrs. Thompson, I have to be honest with you. Your family's financial position is much more precarious than it was 6 months ago, Steinberg said from behind his imposing desk. Vincent has made a series of aggressive investments and business decisions that have significantly reduced your liquid assets. Sarah stared at him in confusion. What does that mean exactly? Steinberg pulled out a thick folder of documents. It means that the cash reserves Marcus had accumulated, the investment portfolios that provided your family security, the real estate holdings that represented your children's inheritance. Much of it has been converted into business investments that may or may not prove profitable. But Vincent said he was being conservative, protecting our interests. Steinberg's expression was carefully neutral, but Sarah caught the implication. Vincent has legal authority to make these decisions under the power of attorney agreement. Everything he's done has been within his rights. Whether these decisions align with what Marcus would have wanted, that's a different question. Sarah left Steinberg's office with a growing sense of panic. She tried calling Vincent immediately, but her calls went straight to voicemail. When he finally called back 2 days later, his tone was defensive and impatient. Sarah, I don't have time for this right now. I'm managing a complex business empire while also trying to keep my own restaurants profitable. If you don't trust my judgment, maybe you should find someone else to handle Marcus's affairs. The threat was implicit but unmistakable. If Sarah questioned Vincent's decisions, she might lose the only person willing to help manage the impossible complexity of their situation. Sarah backed down, apologized for questioning him, and tried to focus on what she could control, advocating for Marcus's medical care and taking care of their children. But the children were struggling too, and Sarah was beginning to realize that Vincent's support for them had been more superficial than she'd initially recognized. Emma, who had always been Vincent's favorite, began asking why Uncle Vincent didn't visit anymore. He used to bring me presents and tell me funny stories, she said one evening as Sarah tucked her into bed in their new house. Smaller than their penthouse, but still comfortable, though Emma clearly missed her old room. Now he only talks to you about boring grown-up stuff. Michael, trying to be mature beyond his years, had been asking more pointed questions. Glamorous events funded by the wealth he'd siphoned away. Sarah stumbled upon one post by accident, a picture of Vincent at a high-end restaurant opening, champagne in hand, captioning it "Living the Dream." The irony burned. Sarah was left to navigate the wreckage alone. She took a part-time job at a local bookstore to cover groceries, pawned some jewelry for bill money, and spent sleepless nights poring over financial statements she barely understood. The children's questions grew more frequent, their confusion turning to resentment. Why doesn't Uncle Vincent love us anymore? Emma asked one tearful night. I don't know, baby, Sarah whispered, holding her close. But your dad will wake up soon. He'll fix this. We just have to hold on. Little did Sarah know, Marcus's awakening was imminent, but it would bring not just relief, but a storm of reckoning. Vincent's betrayal had left scars that money alone couldn't heal, and the family he'd abandoned would soon demand answers and justice. 5 months after the accident that shattered his world, Marcus Thompson began to emerge from the fog of his coma like a ship breaking through a stormy sea. The process was agonizingly slow, first a twitch in his fingers during one of Sarah's endless bedside vigils, then unintelligible murmurs that sent nurses scrambling to check monitors, and finally, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, his eyes fluttered open, locking onto Sarah's tear-streaked face. Sarah? His voice was a hoarse whisper, barely audible over the rhythmic beeping of hospital machines. But to Sarah, it was a symphony of hope, a lifeline in the darkness that had consumed their lives. I'm here, love. I'm right here. She clutched his hand, her fingers trembling as she squeezed his, tears streaming down her face. Doctors and nurses flooded the room, their voices a blur of medical jargon. EEG readings, pupil response, Glasgow Coma scale. But Sarah's world narrowed to Marcus's dark eyes, alive and searching for her. The initial euphoria was quickly tempered by the harsh reality of Marcus's condition. The traumatic brain injury had left him with significant impairments, partial paralysis on his left side, memory gaps that swallowed entire years of his life, speech that stumbled and slurred, and cognitive fatigue that made even a 5-minute conversation feel like running a marathon. The doctors were cautiously optimistic, but they warned Sarah that rehabilitation would be a long, grueling journey with no guaranteed outcome. "He's alive, Mrs. Thompson," Dr. Martinez said, her kind eyes softening the clinical truth. "That's a miracle in itself. But recovery will be a marathon, not a sprint. He'll need physical therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy, and above all, he'll need you and the kids." Sarah nodded, overwhelmed but resolute. She'd already lost so much: her home, her financial security, her trust in Vincent. She wouldn't lose Marcus too. That evening the children visited, their small faces a mixture of awe, fear, and desperate hope. Emma, now 8.5, climbed carefully onto the hospital bed, her curls brushing Marcus's shoulder as she hugged him gently, afraid to hurt him. "Daddy, we missed you so much," she whispered, her voice trembling. Michael, 10 and trying to be the man of the house, stood at the foot of the bed, clutching a soccer ball like a shield. His eyes were red, but he refused to cry, not wanting to burden his father. "You're going to get better, right, Dad?" he asked, his voice cracking. Marcus managed a weak smile, his right hand, still functional, reaching to stroke Emma's hair. "Missed you more," he said, each word a laborious victory over his damaged brain. To Michael, he added, "I'm fighting, son, for you." The children's visit gave Marcus a spark of purpose, but it also revealed the toll his absence had taken. Emma clung to him longer than usual, and Michael's questions about school, soccer, their old life, hinted at a world turned upside down. Sarah guided them gently out of the room when Marcus's eyes began to droop, exhaustion overtaking him. As days turned into weeks, Marcus began piecing together the fragments of his missing months. Sarah filled him in with carefully curated truths, focusing on the positive. The children's resilience, the support from neighbors like Mrs. Chun, the tireless work of his medical team. But she couldn't hide the strain in her voice, the dark circles under her eyes, or the way her hands shook when she thought no one was watching. One afternoon, as Sarah adjusted his pillows, Marcus's gaze sharpened. "Where's Vincent?" he asked, his voice stronger but still halting. The question caught Sarah off guard. Vincent's absence had become so glaring that she'd stopped noticing it, like a wound that had scabbed over but still ached. Sarah hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "He's been busy with work," she said, avoiding Marcus's eyes. "He helped a lot at first, but things got complicated." Marcus's brow furrowed, his instincts, honed by years of reading people in boardrooms, sensing the evasion. "Complicated? How?" His speech was slow, but his mind was waking up, piecing together the gaps in Sarah's story. Sarah wanted to protect him, to shield him from the truth until he was stronger, but Marcus's stare demanded honesty. "He's been managing the business," she said finally, "and our finances, but I haven't seen him in weeks." He stepped back. Marcus's jaw tightened, a flicker of the old fire in his eyes. He didn't press further. His energy was too limited, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Why would Vincent, his blood brother, the man he'd trusted with everything, step away when they needed him most? Rehabilitation became Marcus's battlefield. Physical therapists pushed him to rebuild strength in his weakened left side, guiding him through grueling exercises that left him sweating and trembling. Speech therapists drilled him on words and sentences, helping him regain the fluency that had once made him a commanding speaker. Occupational therapists taught him adaptive techniques, how to button a shirt with one hand, how to use a tablet to communicate when words failed. Through it all, Sarah was his rock. She attended every therapy session, took meticulous notes, and researched experimental treatments that might accelerate his recovery. She drove him to appointments, advocated for better care, and held him when frustration overwhelmed him. But the financial strain was impossible to ignore. Hospital bills arrived in stacks. Insurance claims were denied for technicalities, and Sarah's credit cards were maxed out from covering basic necessities. One evening, as they sat in Marcus's hospital room, Sarah broke down. "We sold the penthouse," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Vincent said it was necessary to cover expenses. We moved to a smaller house in Queens. The kids are adjusting, but it's been hard." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "Vincent decided?" His voice was clearer now, the result of weeks of therapy, but the effort still cost him. Sarah nodded, tears spilling over. "You gave him power of attorney. He managed everything while you were gone." The knot in Marcus's stomach tightened. Power of attorney was meant to protect his family, not expose them to risk. He asked for more details about the business, the investments, their savings. Sarah's answers were hesitant, incomplete. She'd been so focused on his survival that she hadn't questioned Vincent's decisions until it was too late. "I try to handle it," she said, her voice breaking. "But Vincent, he just left. Stopped helping. Ignored us. The kids keep asking for him, and I don't know what to tell them." Marcus felt a surge of anger, tempered by his physical limitations. His brother, the one person he trusted above all others, had abandoned them? It didn't compute. Vincent had been his best man, his confidant, the uncle who'd spoiled Emma and Michael with love. There had to be an explanation. When Marcus was discharged to outpatient rehab 2 weeks later, he insisted on reviewing the financial records himself. Sarah brought boxes of documents to their new home, a modest 4-bedroom house in Queens, a far cry from their Manhattan penthouse. As Marcus sat at the kitchen table, his cane propped against the chair, he pored over spreadsheets and bank statements, his mind struggling to process the numbers through cognitive fog. What he found was a nightmare. Assets liquidated at a loss. Funds funneled into Vincent's restaurant chain through shell companies. Loans taken against Thompson Industries credit, with no trace of where the money had gone. Their personal savings, millions set aside for the children's future, were gone, replaced by vague business reinvestments. Marcus's hands shook as he closed the laptop. "He stole everything," he said, his voice low but steady. Sarah placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch grounding him. "We can fight this, Marcus. Steinberg says there's a case. Breach of fiduciary duty, maybe fraud. We can get some of it back." Marcus nodded, but his thoughts were on Vincent, not lawyers. The brother who'd laughed with him, fought with him, promised to always have his back. How had it come to this? He picked up the phone and dialed Vincent's number, his hand trembling not from weakness but from the weight of betrayal. The call went to voicemail. "Vincent, it's me. We need to talk," Marcus said, his voice firm despite the effort. He hung up, staring at the phone, waiting for a response that never came. The silence was louder than any confession. Vincent had taken everything, money, trust, family, and left them to drown. But Marcus Thompson was a survivor, and he would fight not just for his wealth, but for the life he'd built with love. Intense music builds. 2 months after his awakening, Marcus Thompson walked into the offices of Thompson Industries for the first time since the accident. His steps were deliberate, supported by a sleek black cane, but his presence filled the room with the same commanding energy that had built an empire. Employees stopped in their tracks, some whispering in awe, others offering hesitant smiles. Their leader had returned from the edge of death, and the air crackled with hope and uncertainty. "Welcome back, Mr. Thompson," said Maria, his longtime assistant, her voice thick with emotion. She'd been one of the few who'd stayed loyal through Vincent's chaotic tenure, keeping the company afloat despite his reckless decisions. "We've missed you." Marcus nodded, managing a small smile. "Missed this place too." His speech was clearer now, but he still paused to choose words carefully, a reminder of the battle he was still fighting. His first days back were a whirlwind of discovery. Thompson Industries was in shambles, major projects stalled, key clients lost to competitors, debts piling up from loans Vincent had taken in the company's name. Marcus met with his core team, Maria, the CFO, and a few trusted project managers, who painted a grim picture. Vincent's management had prioritized personal gain over sustainability, leaving the company teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. Marcus hired forensic accountants to untangle the mess. Late nights in his old office, surrounded by the mahogany desk his father had built, revealed the depth of Vincent's betrayal. Millions had been siphoned into Vincent's restaurants through shell companies. Contracts had been rigged to favor Vincent's interests, with kickbacks disguised as consulting fees. The penthouse sale, which Vincent had justified as necessary, had funneled millions into his personal accounts, with only a fraction going to Sarah and the children. Why? Marcus whispered one night, alone in his office, staring at a photo of him and Vincent from their childhood. Two boys grinning in front of their father's garage. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound. Vincent wasn't just a brother. He was blood, bound by shared sacrifices, late-night talks, and promises to always protect each other. Sarah urged caution when Marcus shared his findings. "Your health comes first," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "You're still recovering. Let Steinberg handle the legal side." But Marcus needed answers, not just justice. He needed to understand how the brother he'd loved could destroy everything he'd built. Using contacts from his business network, Marcus tracked Vincent down. His brother was living in a waterfront mansion in Long Island, his restaurant chain expanding rapidly thanks to the stolen funds. Social media posts, carefully curated to project success, showed Vincent at gala events, surrounded by new friends and a glamorous girlfriend, living a life Marcus's money had bought. Marcus arranged a meeting at a quiet coffee shop in Brooklyn, a neutral ground far from the corporate battlefields of Manhattan. He arrived early, his cane tapping softly on the floor as he settled into a corner booth, his mind racing with what he'd say. When Vincent walked in, Marcus barely recognized him. The brother who'd once worn thrift store jeans now sported a tailored suit, his hair slicked back, his watch gleaming with diamonds. But his eyes were uneasy, avoiding Marcus's gaze. "Marcus," Vincent said, sliding into the booth. "You're looking good. Better than I expected." "Sit," Marcus said, his voice steady, his eyes locked on Vincent's. The word wasn't a request. The conversation began civilly, Marcus laying out the facts like a prosecutor. The liquidated assets, the diverted funds, the shell companies, the abandoned family. He spoke slowly, deliberately, each word a step toward clarity. "You had power of attorney, meant to protect, not steal." Vincent leaned back, his charismatic smile faltering. "You don't understand, Marcus. The business was sinking. Medical bills were through the roof. I made tough calls to keep things afloat. I saved what I could." "Lies," Marcus said, his voice cutting through Vincent's excuses like a blade. "You took millions, left Sarah, kids, nothing. My company dying." Vincent's facade cracked, his voice rising. "You always had everything. The perfect life, the perfect family, the respect, the empire. I was always the screw-up, the second best. For once, I took what I deserved. You'd have done the same in my shoes." The admission hit Marcus like a punch, but he didn't flinch. "Family doesn't steal," he said, his voice low but fierce. "Family protects. You chose greed." Vincent stood, his face twisted with defiance and guilt. "It's done, Marcus. Sue me if you want. You'll never get it all back. I'm not the villain here. You left me no choice, always outshining me, always better." As Vincent stormed out, Marcus sat motionless, the weight of the confrontation settling into his bones. He'd hoped for remorse, for a glimpse of the brother he'd loved, but all he saw was resentment, a poison that had festered for years, unnoticed. Yet in that pain, Marcus found clarity. Vincent's betrayal wouldn't define him. He'd rebuild not for revenge, but for his family. Back home, Marcus gathered Sarah, Emma, and Michael in their small living room. The kids sat close, sensing the gravity of the moment. "We've been hurt," Marcus said, his speech smoother now, but still deliberate. "But we're stronger. We'll rebuild together." Sarah squeezed his hand, her eyes shining with pride. "We're with you, Marcus. Always." The legal fight began the next day. Steinberg filed suits for fraud, embezzlement, and breach of fiduciary duty, backed by the accountant's damning evidence. Vincent's empire, built on stolen foundations, began to crack under scrutiny. But for Marcus, the real battle was internal, reclaiming his strength, his purpose, and the trust that Vincent had shattered. Marcus Thompson threw himself into the rebuilding with the same relentless determination that had built his empire from nothing. His body still ached from the accident. His mind faltered under cognitive strain, but his spirit was unbreakable. He woke each morning with a single goal: to restore what Vincent had taken, not just the money, but the security and hope his family deserved. The first task was stabilizing Thompson Industries. Marcus met with creditors, negotiating payment plans to manage the debts Vincent had racked up. He made personal calls to clients who'd fled during Vincent's tenure, leveraging his reputation and honesty to win them back. "I'm back," he told them, his voice steady despite the effort. "And I'm not going anywhere." Slowly, contracts were renewed, projects restarted. He downsized ruthlessly, selling off non-essential assets to focus on core strengths: affordable housing developments that had always been his passion. Loyal employees rallied around him, inspired by his resilience. Maria, his assistant, worked late hours to reorganize files Vincent had left in chaos. The CFO, a grizzled veteran named Tom, uncovered additional discrepancies that strengthened their legal case. At home, Sarah became more than a supportive spouse. She became a partner in every sense. She enrolled in online business courses to understand Marcus's world, poring over financial reports with him late at night. She took over budgeting, cutting costs without sacrificing the kids' needs. When Marcus doubted himself, exhausted by therapy and the weight of their losses, Sarah reminded him of his strength. "You survived a coma," she said fiercely. "You can survive this." The children adapted in their own ways. Michael, now 11, took on more responsibilities, mowing the lawn, helping Emma with homework, even cooking simple meals when Sarah was at the hospital. His soccer games became a family rallying point, with Marcus cheering from the sidelines, cane in hand, his voice growing stronger with each shout of encouragement. Emma channeled her emotions into art, her crayon drawings evolving into detailed sketches of their family's journey. One drawing, a vibrant scene of their new house with Marcus standing tall, no cane in sight, hung above the kitchen table, a daily reminder of hope. "This is us now," Emma said proudly when she presented it. Marcus framed it, his eyes misty. The legal battle against Vincent was relentless. Steinberg's team uncovered more evidence. Offshore accounts forged signatures, emails showing Vincent's deliberate intent to deceive. Vincent fought back, hiring expensive lawyers and countersuing for defamation, claiming Marcus was smearing his name to save a failing company. He spread lies through mutual contacts, painting himself as the victim of Marcus's unrealistic expectations. But the evidence was overwhelming. Courts froze Vincent's assets, halting his restaurant expansions. Investigations revealed tax fraud, drawing IRS scrutiny. His mansion was foreclosed, his girlfriend left, and his social circle evaporated as his lies unraveled. Vincent's world, built on Marcus's stolen wealth, collapsed under its own weight. Marcus could have pursued total destruction, prison time, public humiliation, but he paused. Late one night, he found an old letter from their mother, Maria, tucked in a box of documents. "Take care of each other," she'd written before her death. "You're all you have." For her sake, Marcus offered Vincent a settlement. Return what he could, cash, assets, anything, and avoid criminal charges. In exchange, Vincent would sever all contact with the family. They met one last time in Steinberg's office, Vincent a shadow of his former swagger. His suit was rumpled, his eyes hollow. "I was wrong," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "Jealousy, it ate me alive. I thought I deserved what you had." Marcus stared at him, searching for the brother he'd once known. "Forgive," he said, his voice steady, "but won't forget. You hurt my family." Vincent signed a settlement, returning a fraction of the stolen millions, enough to pay off medical debts and stabilize the business. Then he walked away, a broken man, destined for a life of obscurity. Marcus's true victory wasn't financial. It was in the lessons he internalized. Trust is fragile, but resilience is infinite. He rebuilt Thompson Industries with transparency, focusing on community-driven projects like accessible housing, inspired by his own disability. Profits returned, modest but honest, built on integrity rather than greed. The family healed through small, deliberate steps. They took that long-planned Italy trip, a testament to their survival. In Rome, Marcus walked unaided down cobblestone streets, holding Sarah's hand as Emma sketched the Colosseum and Michael chased pigeons. "I almost lost everything," Marcus told Sarah one evening, overlooking the Mediterranean. "But I gained perspective. Family isn't blood, it's choice." Sarah leaned into him. "We chose you, Marcus. Always." Hopeful music builds. 3 years after the accident, Marcus Thompson stood on the small balcony of their Queens home, watching the sunset over a neighborhood that felt more like home than their Manhattan penthouse ever had. Thompson Industries was no longer a sprawling empire, but it was thriving, employing hundreds and building communities with affordable, accessible housing. Marcus's cane was gone most days, his speech nearly normal, though he still tired easily, a reminder of the battle he'd fought. The journey to redemption had been grueling, but it was complete, not because of wealth regained, but because of the family they'd preserved. Sarah had become a financial manager in her own right, overseeing the company's budget with a precision Marcus admired. Emma's art was now displayed in local galleries, her talent blossoming under the family's encouragement. Michael, now a teenager, led his soccer team to a championship, dedicating the win to his father. Vincent was a ghost in their lives. He worked a low-level job in another state, his dreams of grandeur shattered. Occasionally, letters arrived, apologies, pleas for forgiveness, but Marcus kept his distance. "He's my brother," he told Sarah, "but he's not my family anymore." For the sake of their parents' memory, Marcus sent Vincent a small sum to start over, but he drew a firm line. No contact, no reconciliation. Marcus's redemption was in his impact. He began mentoring young entrepreneurs, sharing his story at conferences and community centers. "Wealth can be stolen," he told them, "but purpose endures. Build something that matters." His talks inspired others, turning his pain into a beacon for. The air was warm with the scent of freshly cut grass, and the small Queen's backyard glowed under the soft golden haze of an early evening sun. Unlike the grandeur of their former penthouse, where chandeliers sparkled like constellations and guests sipped champagne in designer gowns, this was humble. Folding chairs lined the fence, neighbors brought home-cooked dishes in foil trays, and strings of dollar store fairy lights twinkled against the siding of the house. Yet it felt holy. It felt sacred. This wasn't about status anymore. This was about survival, about family, about love renewed. Emma, just 8 years old, stepped forward first. She clutched a sheet of paper in hands that trembled, her voice cracking at first, but growing stronger with every word. Through storms and fire, through nights so long, we learned where we truly belong. Not in riches, not in gold, but in the hands we choose to hold. A hush fell over the crowd. Some neighbors wiped their eyes. Sarah covered her mouth, stunned at the wisdom flowing from such a young soul. Next was Michael. He sat on a simple wooden stool, guitar resting on his knee. His fingers strummed softly, the melody raw but filled with heart. The notes rose into the twilight, weaving themselves around the people gathered, wrapping them in a blanket of hope. It wasn't polished, it wasn't professional, but it was pure. Then came Sarah and Marcus. Marcus leaned on his cane, his body still bearing the weight of his long recovery. Every step was a battle, but today each step felt like a victory. He looked at Sarah, his partner through every storm, and reached for her hand. Their fingers laced together, trembling not from weakness, but from the overwhelming weight of love. Sarah's voice quivered, yet it carried like a bell in the evening air. Her vows echoed the ones she had spoken decades earlier in a college chapel, when life was young and promises were easy. "In sickness and in health, in wealth or in want, I choose you." But this time, the words weren't idealistic. They were tested, forged in fire. The neighbors cheered, clapping and shouting words of joy. Children giggled. Friends wiped tears. But Marcus bent his head low, whispering into Sarah's ear so only she could hear. "This time I know what that really means, and I'll never forget it again." It wasn't a cathedral. It wasn't a ballroom. It was a backyard filled with mismatched chairs, fairy lights, and the laughter of children. And yet, in that moment, it was more beautiful than any palace, because it was theirs. Weeks later, the Thompsons found themselves in a courtroom. The walls were cold, the air heavy, and the weight of judgment hung like a storm cloud. The man who had caused the crash, gaunt, pale, his hands trembling, stood before the judge. His reckless decision had taken a life that night and nearly ended Marcus's. His eyes darted everywhere but toward the Thompsons. The gavel struck. 7 years. Vehicular manslaughter. The crowd murmured. Some called it justice. Some called it too light. But Marcus? Marcus simply sat still, his face unreadable. That night, Sarah walked into the kitchen and found him seated at the table, a single lamp illuminating his figure. He held a pen in hand, a half-written letter before him. To the family of the man who hurt us, it read, I know what it feels like to lose. I know what it feels like to grieve. And though your son, your husband, your brother brought pain into our lives, I refuse to let hate have the final word. Sarah's eyes widened. Marcus, are you forgiving him? He set the pen down slowly. Yes. Forgiveness isn't weakness, Sarah. It's strength. If I carry this hate, it will poison me. It will poison us. And I won't let his mistake destroy us twice. She wanted to argue. She wanted to hold on to the anger. But as she looked into his eyes, she saw it. Peace. Hard won, but real. And she realized his greatest victory wasn't surviving the coma. It was surviving bitterness. One evening, Sarah called Emma and Michael to dinner. The table was simple, no glittering chandeliers, no imported wine. Just stew, bread, and the laughter of a family still learning to breathe again. But Marcus's voice was different that night. Sit with me, he said, his tone deep, commanding. The children obeyed, sensing this was not just dinner, it was a lesson. Do you remember the penthouse? He asked. Emma's eyes lit up. With a balcony that looked over the whole city? Michael chuckled. And the pool on the roof. Man, that was awesome. Marcus smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. Yes, it was beautiful. But children, beauty like that can vanish overnight. Wealth can be lost. Power can be stolen. But love endures. He leaned forward, his voice dropping lower. I trusted my own brother with everything I had, and he betrayed me. But betrayal cannot kill your soul unless you let it. Don't let anger define you. Don't let money control you. Protect your kindness. It's the strongest thing you own. Emma tilted her head. So should we never trust anyone? Marcus smiled gently. No, sweetheart, you must trust, but choose wisely. And when someone betrays you, don't let it turn your heart into stone. Forgive, but remember, trust again, but with wisdom. Michael leaned forward, whispering, I'll remember, Dad. And in that cramped kitchen, the Thompsons passed down more than food. They passed down a legacy. Queens was loud. The walls were thin. The house was small, but it was alive. Every Saturday, the backyard filled with the smell of grilled meat and the sound of laughter. Neighbors came with casseroles, children ran barefoot in the grass, and Marcus, once the man who dined in Michelin-starred restaurants, found joy flipping burgers on a simple charcoal grill. Emma discovered her gift for art. She filled notebooks with drawings of neighbors, sunsets, and dreams of a brighter world. Michael pursued both soccer and music, finding balance between strength and creativity. Sarah, once the woman who wore designer dresses to charity galas, now wore an apron at the local shelter, serving meals with a smile. And she felt richer than she ever had before. Marcus returned to Thompson Industries not with the swagger of a tycoon, but with the humility of a man reborn. He sold off excess, rebuilt with purpose, and redirected his empire toward creating affordable housing for families like the ones who now surrounded him. Some investors walked away, chasing bigger profits. But others stayed, inspired by his vision. And in every choice, every handshake, every smile shared across their kitchen table, Marcus and Sarah discovered that true wealth wasn't in skyscrapers. It was in the bonds of love. Years passed. Scars faded, but never disappeared. Marcus became a mentor not just to his children, but to countless young dreamers. He welcomed them into his modest office, not with charts and profit margins, but with stories. Stories of betrayal. Stories of survival. Stories of rebuilding. Wealth can vanish overnight, he told them. But love, loyalty, and integrity, those are treasures no thief can steal. Vincent, his brother, faded into obscurity. His lavish lifestyle collapsed under debts and lawsuits. He became a ghost of greed, a cautionary tale whispered in business circles. But Marcus did not pursue him. His betrayal nearly killed me, Marcus confessed to Sarah one quiet night. But chasing revenge would finish the job. My revenge is this life I've rebuilt. My revenge is peace. Sarah leaned her head against his shoulder, and it's the sweetest revenge of all. Together, they watched Emma unveil her first gallery painting. They listened to Michael play guitar in his first concert. They hosted neighbors in their small backyard, celebrating birthdays, anniversaries, and the simple miracle of life. And on a quiet evening, the family sat together on their small balcony. The sky blazed with sunset. The world was noisy and perfect, but alive. Marcus's voice carried softly, but firmly. Wealth can be lost. Love endures. Choose who you trust wisely, but never stop trusting. Because in the end, it's not money that builds a legacy. It's love. The music swelled. The screen faded to black. What a journey of betrayal, survival, and triumph. This story reminds us, family loyalty should lift us up, never tear us down. If this story touched your heart, smash that like button, subscribe for more cinematic stories, and share your experience in the comments. Have you faced betrayal? How did you rebuild? Your words might inspire someone who desperately needs hope today. Until next time, stay strong, stay loyal, and choose your family wisely.